Allow me to introduce myself.
I am the last sane sports fan.
I am a genius by trade.
I just knew too much. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Possibly.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to The View from the Midwest. It's time for another Monday morning quarterback edition, despite the fact that you're probably watching this in the afternoon, because that's generally when I post them. But that it is. Let's get right to it. Let's talk about some of the Midwestern action around the NFL over the past week. Back on Thursday, the Jaguars took down the Titans, continuing to prove that the Titans have a long way to go. They're going through a lot of turmoil in Tennessee. They possibly should have won. They allowed Jacksonville to score 10 points in the fourth quarter in a game to which they were ahead for the majority of it. But when you get 2 field goals in the first half and then 1 touchdown in the third and then nothing in the fourth, chances are you're not going to come out on top. So they fall 19-13, fall to 2-8. Jacksonville is 4-6. Marcus Mariota, 231 yards, but no scores. Aaron Andrews with 78 yards, and Darnell Walker with 109 yards receiving. Not great stats, not terrible, but again, the Titans just not getting things done right now. It was supposed to be kind of a building year under Ken Whisenhunt. Whisenhunt is now gone. Mariota is still there. He is doing okay, but somebody needs to come in and give him the kind of system to where he can flourish in the next opportunity. Otherwise, you're going to have another Sam Bradford, because Sam Bradford, for all his detractors, and there are many, and they are fully justified in their detraction, Sam Bradford had all the tools to succeed as a number 1 quarterback in the NFL. He's not really doing all that much with the Philadelphia Eagles, but overall he has the tools. But I think it really put him behind the 8 ball too much during his tenure in St. Louis, because he never got an offensive coordinator that was going to bring out the top notch of his skill set, and he had to deal with, I believe it was 4 offensive coordinators during his time in St. Louis. Obviously now he would be under a 5th one in Philadelphia, and that's just not going to work unless you're a quarterback like Peyton Manning, where you just understand the game to the nth degree. You have to have an offensive coordinator that's going to bring out your talents, and if you're constantly trying to learn new offenses, it's not going to work. And I hope that doesn't hold true for Marcus Mariota, as I think he's got some talent, but it'll remain to be seen what he can do with that. 18-13 was the final as Detroit knocked off Oakland, as the Lions find themselves on a bit of a roll. Matthew Stafford is not turning the ball over, and that seems to be a big key for the Lions to try to get wins. Abdullah only had 44 yards rushing, but Charles Johnson led the way with 88 yards passing, and Detroit is now 3-7. They started the year very poor, but now they've won a couple games in a row. They weren't flashy by doing it in any means. 6 points in the first, 3 in the second, none in the third. Oakland scored 13, all of their 13 in the third quarter, so they came out guns blazing after halftime, but nothing in the fourth quarter, and then Detroit won it with 3 field goals, 9 points in the fourth, so they ended up getting the win there. As I said, 3-7 now for the Lions. They're not really in contention for anything, but hey, they're getting some wins now. The Colts with a bit of an upset, simply because record-wise, you would have thought that Atlanta had a good shot at getting this one in the win column, but Matt Hasselbeck is doing a good job in relief of Andrew Luck. I still don't buy into this nonsense that the Colts are better off with Matt Hasselbeck as the quarterback. As long as Andrew Luck is healthy, I think he's got to be your starter. You've got to live with his growing pains. He's going through kind of that sophomore slump, despite the fact that this isn't really his second year. But he's finally kind of hitting the wall a little bit. making some mistakes, getting in that mental game, but I think he's got to bounce back. I mean, the guy is just way too talented to not. But 213 yards for Hasselbeck, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Again, that's something that Luck was doing, and I think it's obvious now that it's not necessarily just on him. Matt Ryan had 280 yards, 3 touchdowns, but 3 interceptions. That is kind of the difference. Neither team had a good rushing day. Obviously, receiving was not great either. The leading receiver for Indianapolis was Frank Gore with 46 yards, so obviously Hasselbeck was spreading the ball around. Julio Jones had a great day, 160 yards, but Indianapolis did just enough. They won it in the fourth quarter. They got 10 points. They shut out Atlanta in that fourth quarter, and Indianapolis now improves to 5-5, staying alive in that AFC South, which is wide open because absolutely nobody wants to take the reins. Speaking of that division, the Texans beat the Jets 24-17 in a bit of an upset as well, because the Jets had been kind of rolling, but they fall to 5-5. Houston moves up to 5-5. Teams heading in different directions. Yates was the quarterback for Houston as they kind of go through that quarterback carousel right now due to injuries and just ineffective play. He had 229 yards, 2 touchdowns. Not bad stats, but it's not going to light the world on fire. But again, if you're getting wins, you don't necessarily need to light the world on fire. Houston got all their points in the middle quarters. They sandwiched 2 goose eggs with 10 and 14 in the second and third, respectively. So, I mean, they pick up a big win. Most people were going to probably be picking the Jets in that one, and the Texans come out with a win. And again, that AFC South is just wide open. You keep yourself alive, and who knows what can happen. The Broncos edged the Bears 17-15. Now, there's a lot of headlines going on about how, is Brock Osweiler ready to take the reins, and is this his coming out party? I mean, really? 2 touchdowns, and now we're going to say that he's going to replace the best quarterback in the NFL, possibly in NFL history. I mean, you can argue that till you're blue in the face, and people are going to have different opinions. I have a high opinion of Peyton Manning simply because he is his own offensive coordinator. Sometimes that has been to his detriment, but still, from a skill set, I don't think there's anybody who could bring more to the game besides him. There's been better throwers. There's been better winners, I guess you could say, but Peyton Manning is still one of the tops. But Brock Osweiler had a good day. He gets the win, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and I think that is the key, because that has been the biggest problem that Peyton Manning has had this year, is throwing so many interceptions, and not only turning the ball over, but in key moments in the game, to where the team is depending on him to get something rolling, to turn things around. Perhaps they need a key scoring drive, and they're just not getting it because he ends up throwing the ball away. Hillman had 102 yards, so again, Denver kind of getting that rushing effect going. And Daniels with 69 yards was their leading receiver. Denver improves to 8-2. The Bears fall to 4-6. They're not completely dead in the water, but that is really going to limit your chances now at winning the NFC North, especially since they have 2 teams ahead of them who played each other and ended up looking pretty good. The Cowboys beat the Dolphins 24-14 as Tony Romo has a pretty good day in his welcome back party. 227 yards, 2 touchdowns, but 2 picks. Darren McFadden had 129 yards rushing, so he had a pretty good day as well. Dallas is 3-7, but again, it's another one of those situations where the division is so bad that if you get yourself on a bit of a roll here, 3-7 sounds terrible, but if you get yourself on a roll, maybe get to 500, maybe get to 9-7, that might be just enough to win that division, as nobody's looking good right now. So they get the win there, 24-7. The Chiefs beat up on the Chargers 33-3. Alex Smith had 253 yards passing, but no touchdowns. Most of the scores came from Ware, who is the running back now, filling in. He had 2 touchdowns. And then some key defensive play as well as quite a few field goals in addition. Kansas City got only 12 points at halftime, but then a touchdown in the third quarter, 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, giving them their total of 33. It's amazing what goes on. I understand that this was a division game and you never quite know what is going to happen in those, but the San Diego Chargers have always had just enough talent to give you that belief that they might be able to do something, and then they just crash and burn. And I think this was that kind of game to where they were just flat out outplayed, outcoached, out everything in just about every situation. And it's kind of a shame because I think they really are wasting Phillip Rivers' talent. He had a chance to be one of the big-time quarterbacks, and he was a name in the league, but he's getting to be that kind of point to where it's just like your best football is probably behind you. The Chargers don't have enough pieces right around them to really make a push, but focusing on the Midwestern team, the Chiefs are now 5-5. San Diego is 2-8. Talked about that matchup in the NFC North. The Packers kind of put a lot of doubts aside. They had gone on a bit of a losing streak. I believe it was 3 games, if not 2 games. But they wallop the Vikings in Minnesota, 30-13. Aaron Rodgers didn't have a huge day, 212 yards passing, but 2 touchdowns. Teddy Bridgewater threw for almost 300, but only 1 touchdown. Eddie Lacy had 100 yards. Adrian Peterson only had 45 yards. He did score, but he also fumbled the ball. Jermaine Jones had 109 yards and 1 touchdown. Maybe Jermaine isn't his first name, but I apologize for that. And 106 yards. So the stats in terms of the leaders match up. But Green Bay did just enough. They got some field goals. There was a touchdown by Minnesota, as my brain kind of shuts down for a second. But they failed to get the point after. A couple field goals for Green Bay in the first quarter, 10 points in the second, 3 in the third, 11 in the fourth. So they just kind of chipped away at that Minnesota defense, which had been doing a good job all season long, but they just couldn't do enough in this one to really get it going. Adrian Peterson obviously couldn't get anything going, and Green Bay really kind of pushed themselves to the top of that division. They're now 7-3. They are actually tied with Minnesota, but obviously on head-to-head, things are going to favor the Packers, especially with that return game being played later in the year in Green Bay, which will be obviously outdoors and everything. So obviously the only game left was potentially the worst game to watch. I didn't get to see that Bears Broncos game, so I can't tell you how bad that might have been in terms of being boring, but the St. Louis Rams lose to the Baltimore Ravens 16-13. Now, the St. Louis Rams were making a change at quarterback. They were trying Case Keenum out. Obviously, that didn't work to great effect, as Keenum only had 136 yards and a touchdown. Didn't have any interceptions. But the St. Louis Rams offense is just completely inept. It is completely anemic. It does absolutely nothing. The leading receiver was Lance Kendricks with 43 yards. I believe at least 40 he caught on one pass. Maybe it was 30. So he only had 13 receiving yards outside of that. The one of the 2 touchdowns that St. Louis had was caught by Kendricks. Ty Gurley has been struggling behind an ineffective offensive line. Ty Gurley is still the man. Ty Gurley has shown enough, even though he's only played in 3 or so games. He has shown that he is going to be a force to be reckoned with. But again, you cannot rely solely on a running back in today's NFL. You've got some key injuries to some key people on that offensive line, and that's going to make it difficult, especially for a rookie running back as good as he is. But the Rams just can't do anything right. Their receivers are dropping balls. Tavon Austin dropped some balls. Wes Welker dropped a key ball on a potential game-winning drive there in the fourth quarter. Case Keenum was missing passes. It's just an offense that is not designed to win games. It is designed potentially not to lose them. But again, you cannot do this in this NFL. This is not the '85 Bears, who many people in today's society probably don't know that Jeff Fisher was a part of. But it's just a situation where you can't win that way anymore. The Rams defense is very, very, very good, but this is not the Baltimore Ravens of a couple seasons ago or even back in 2000. This is not the '85 Bears. You cannot win on defense alone, and the Rams just do not have enough offense whether it is scheme, whether it is personnel, it doesn't matter. They don't have enough right now to win games. And this is another game. The Rams, quite frankly, let me see, they're right now 4-6. They should be at least 6-4, if not 7-3. And that is being completely honest, taking all bias out of it. There have been enough games that were winnable there at the end, regardless of how the Rams played, regardless of how things turned out. There were enough games that were winnable at the end of the game that they should be much better than their current record is. But quite frankly, their current record does exemplify what this team really is at this point, because they just cannot score. 13 points is not enough. And the defense is going to get a lot of blame because ultimately they lost the game at the end of the game. But the Rams were ahead the entire game until the last, 5 minutes, just to be on the safe side. It might have been even less than that. You cannot have that. The St. Louis Rams need to be able to close out games. I don't care if you can't run the ball. You need to be making enough plays. Draw up plays that go beyond the first down marker. All these short little outs just are not working. They have to figure out something to get the ball down the field. You can't run the same play over and over and over and expect different results just because you're tweaking a little variation here or there. This is not backyard football. This is not sandlot football where you're drawing plays up in the dirt and you expect, oh, well, if we keep running it, it was open that one time, eventually we're going to get that to connect. No, you have to figure out something different, and right now the St. Louis Rams just are not, and they're very deserving of their 4-6 record. Obviously, fans are going to hope that that turns around, but right now it just doesn't. There are still winnable games on the docket. There's division games coming up. For whatever reason, the offense, the team as a whole, plays much better in those division matchups. They play as hard as they can. They put their hearts out on the field, and they pull home wins, and then they lose to teams that they should be blowing the doors off of. But it's just the way things have been under Jeff Fisher. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's too much of an end in sight. That is the view from the Midwest, though. What did you think about Sunday's games? Obviously, there's a lot to talk about, a lot of interesting things going on, not necessarily a lot of good play going on, unless you're a Chiefs fan. Even then, it was kind of mixed. But what are your views on the topic? Let me know in the comment section below. Comment, rate, and subscribe. And until the next time, I'll see you then.
I remember when